In this video, I'll give you some advice for solving the ALEKS problem called distinguishing physical and chemical properties by a macroscopic description. So this problem is going to describe 3 different experiments, and it wants you to determine if each experiment is measuring a physical property or a chemical property of the substance that's being described. I flipped through a lot of versions of the problem, and none of the versions that I saw had can't decide as the correct answer for the problem. So I'm not telling you that can't decide is never going to be the answer, but I don't think it's very likely. Let's begin by just defining or distinguishing a physical property from a chemical property. A chemical property is one that can only be measured during a chemical reaction. So in order to measure a chemical property, you have to take the substance and put it through a chemical reaction. And this means that the substance is destroyed or it is converted in the process of measuring the chemical property. So this is only measured during a reaction. A physical property is something that can be measured at any time, not during a chemical reaction. A chemical property is usually some sort of description of the substance's reactivity. Physical property is going to be something like its color change, conductivity, or its color or its conductivity, temperature, mass, things like that. So this is probably, if you're working on this problem, it's probably pretty challenging for you because these experiments are describing situations that don't make a ton of sense. So the advice that I'm going to give to you when you're working on this particular problem is to just kind of scan through the experiments and look for keywords that are associated with the measurement of a chemical property versus a physical property. And the keywords that I'm going to give you, things that I want you to look for in the description, I want you to look for words like reaction or react, reacted, any kind of variation of that. I want you to look for consumed, consuming, consume, any variation of that as well. I'm going to try to think of some more as we're going through this problem. So let's read experiment A. It says we have a substance that is weighed. Weighing is an example of a physical property. Put inside a sealed flask. Putting something somewhere is definitely not a chemical reaction. Hydrogen gas is added. The mixture is heated. So heating by itself is a physical thing, not a chemical reaction. Is heated until the hydrogen starts being consumed. There's our keyword right there. And then we can stop reading at that point because we have found the word consumed, which is meaning that it's being used up and changed. This is definitely an experiment that's being used to measure a chemical property, and we don't need to keep reading anymore. Let's take a look at the next one. Weighed, that's physical. Putting it somewhere, that's also not a chemical reaction. Adding water, so just the process of adding something to it, that is not a chemical reaction. Adding water until it covers the sample. The volume is recorded, so making measurements. Making measurements like mass measurements, volume measurements, things like that. Those are all physical, not chemical. Let's see, where was I? The volume is recorded, the sample is removed, the volume is recorded from the mass and the volume, the value of R may be calculated. I didn't see anything in there that implied that we were doing a chemical reaction. So this I'm going to classify as physical property. The last one, dissolving something. Dissolving is physical. Drops of another solution containing dissolved sodium hydroxide are added. Adding something is just physical. A pH indicator is used to determine whether sodium hydroxide has reacted. There's our keyword. Reacted makes it a chemical property.